Have you ever noticed that some people can tell you every player on a team, every statistic from the last season, and exactly when the next game is happening, while others couldn't care less? And here's the strange part. Those people aren't necessarily less social, less competitive, or less passionate. In many cases, they're simply directing their attention somewhere else entirely. Because attention is one of the most valuable resources your brain has. And the things you choose not to care about can reveal just as much about you as the things you do. So what does psychology say about people who don't care about sports? The answer is far more interesting than most people realize. For many people, sports are much more than entertainment. Their identity, their community, their ritual. Millions of people organize their weekends around games, follow their favorite teams religiously, and experience genuine emotional highs and lows based on outcomes they have absolutely no control over. From a psychological perspective, that makes perfect sense. Humans evolved in tribes. We naturally seek belonging. Sports provide one of the safest and most accessible forms of tribal identity available today. You wear the colors, support the team, and become part of something bigger than yourself. Psychologists call this social identity theory. Part of your self-image comes from the groups you belong to. Sports teams create a powerful us versus them dynamic that gives people a sense of connection and meaning. But here's the interesting part. Not everyone feels that pull. Some people watch a championship game and feel absolutely nothing. No excitement, no loyalty, no emotional investment. And that often confuses those around them. Why? Because most people assume everyone should naturally care about sports. But psychology suggests otherwise. The surprising truth is that people who don't care about sports often allocate their attention differently, and attention shapes identity. Think about it. Every day your brain is competing for limited cognitive resources. There are books to read, skills to learn, businesses to build, ideas to explore, relationships to strengthen, and goals to pursue. Attention is finite. Every hour spent following one thing is an hour not spent following something else. People who aren't interested in sports aren't necessarily rejecting competition or achievement. They're often investing those psychological needs elsewhere, maybe into entrepreneurship, maybe into science, maybe into art, maybe into personal growth. The destination changes, but the underlying psychological drive often stays the same. But most people don't realize that attention isn't neutral. Whatever repeatedly captures your attention begins shaping your reality. Your interests become your identity. Your identity influences your behavior, and your behavior ultimately determines your future. This is where things get fascinating. One reason some people don't care about sports is because they have a stronger preference for direct agency. In psychology, agency refers to your ability to influence outcomes. Sports fandom offers emotional investment without direct control. You can cheer, you can watch, you can hope, but the final result is completely outside your influence. For some people, that's perfectly enjoyable. For others, it's psychologically unsatisfying. Their brains prefer activities where effort directly affects results. Learning a skill, building a business, improving fitness, creating something meaningful. The reward feels more tangible because their actions produce visible outcomes. Psychologists call this an internal locus of control. People with a strong internal locus of control tend to focus on areas where their decisions matter, and that often changes what they choose to pay attention to. Another factor is dopamine. Whenever people think about dopamine, they usually imagine pleasure. But dopamine is really about anticipation. It's the brain's motivation chemical. Sports create powerful dopamine loops. There's uncertainty, competition, victory, defeat, and suspense. Every game becomes an emotional roller coaster. Your brain loves unpredictability because unpredictable rewards release more dopamine than guaranteed ones. That's one reason sports can become so captivating. But here's the twist. Some people get those dopamine rewards from completely different activities. They get excited by solving problems, learning new concepts, growing investments, creating content, or building projects. Their brains aren't missing dopamine, they're simply finding it somewhere else. The source changes, the mechanism remains the same. Now let's talk about identity, because identity may be the biggest factor of all. Human beings naturally seek answers to one question: who am I? Sports can provide a quick answer. I'm a fan of this team. I'm part of this community. This group represents me. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. In fact, belonging is a fundamental human need. But some people build identity differently. Instead of attaching themselves to external groups, they attach themselves to personal values, goals, or missions. Their identity becomes less about what they support and more about what they create. Less about association, more about contribution. And when that happens, sports often become less psychologically important. Not because they're superior, not because they're smarter, but because their minds are focused on different identity structures. Now imagine what happens when someone never becomes aware of how their attention is being spent. Weeks turn into months. Months turn into years. Hours disappear following outcomes they cannot influence. Again, sports aren't the problem. The problem is unconscious attention. Most people never audit where their mental energy goes. They simply follow whatever captures it. And over time, that creates a gap between intention and reality. They want growth but consume distraction. They want progress but invest attention elsewhere. They want results but spend most of their time emotionally reacting rather than actively creating. The consequence isn't failure, it's drift. And drift is dangerous because it's invisible. You don't notice it happening until years have passed. So what can we learn from people who don't care about sports? First, conduct an attention audit. For 1 week, track where your attention actually goes. Not your intentions, your actual attention. You may discover that your priorities and your behavior are telling two very different stories. Awareness always comes before change. You can't redirect attention you don't notice. Second, ask yourself a simple question. Does this activity increase my agency? In other words, does it move me closer to outcomes I can influence? The goal isn't eliminating entertainment. The goal is balancing consumption with creation. Third, build identity around actions, not labels. Instead of saying, I want to be successful, focus on becoming someone who consistently performs successful behaviors. Identity grows through repetition. Every action becomes a vote for the person you're becoming. Fourth, design your environment carefully. Attention follows visibility. The things constantly placed in front of you eventually become your priorities. If growth matters, make learning visible. Make your goals visible. Make productive behaviors easier to access than distractions. Behavioral science repeatedly shows that environment often beats willpower. Finally, become intentional about dopamine. Most people chase stimulation. Few people build systems. Train yourself to find satisfaction in progress rather than constant entertainment. The reward becomes more sustainable and, over time, far more powerful. Imagine what happens when you apply these principles. You stop reacting automatically. You become more deliberate. Your attention becomes aligned with your goals. Your identity becomes stronger. Your decisions become clearer. Instead of being pulled in every direction, you start moving with purpose. And perhaps most importantly, you begin treating attention as the asset it truly is, because your life is ultimately the sum of what you consistently pay attention to. That's the deeper lesson here. The psychology of people who don't care about sports isn't really about sports at all. It's about attention. It's about agency. It's about identity. And it's about understanding that every interest carries an opportunity cost. The things you focus on shape who you become, so choose them carefully, because your future isn't built by what occasionally grabs your attention. It's built by what consistently keeps it. If you enjoyed this video and want more psychology, self-improvement, and human behavior insights designed to help you think better and live better, subscribe to PsycheLens. And remember, the quality of your life is often determined by the quality of your attention. Guard it wisely.